Morning, everyone. Good morning, Deb.
Good morning.
And yes, Deb and I are going to be reading all the news that we can fit in that's found on the pages of the Lincoln Journal-Star and the Omaha World-Herald. And we're going to begin with some international and national news. And here's some brief articles from the Journal-Star from Mexico City. Mexico has increased its minimum wage to just over 80 pesos a day, though its dollar value is down due to the peso's devaluation. The minimum wage this year was about 73 pesos, worth $4.20 when it was announced last December. Since then, Mexico's peso has declined from 17.35 to a dollar to 20.56 for a dollar as of Monday. This means the 80 peso minimum wage for 2017 is worth about $3.90. Despite a government statement praising the increase in the minimum wage, it barely buys one Big Mac combo with fries and a drink. About 6.9 million people in Mexico's 50.7 million member workforce earn the minimum wage. Manufacturing wages in Mexico average about $2.10 an hour in Mexico, compared to $20.60 per hour in the U.S. From Brussels, Greece creditors in the 19-country Eurozone have agreed to give the cash-strapped country some short-term debt relief, even though they remain to be convinced that the Greek government has delivered on the promises it has made in return for the bailout money that prevented bankruptcy. Jerome, and I cannot pronounce this name, the Eurozone's top official, said Monday that ministers agreed to smooth some of Greece's repayment profile and waive a 2017 increase in interest rates. However, he said Athens still needs to do more for a successful second review of its third program. A successful review is needed for further debt relief discussions and for the involvement of the International Monetary Fund in Greece's bailout. He said a successful review was now unlikely this year. Greece has depended on bailout loans since 2010. And finally, from Tokyo, Ash Carter's final swing across Asia as Pentagon chief shines a spotlight on tough issues his successor will inherit. The issues include concern in Tokyo and Seoul about being forced to pay more for U.S. military protection and worries across the region about North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Carter also will hand off to the next defense secretary unfinished diplomatic business, including deployment of U.S. missile defense systems in South Korea that North Korea and China consider provocative. An increasingly muscular China, too, presents the incoming Trump administration with significant military challenges. Among them are Beijing's moves to establish military footholds on artificial reefs and islets in the South China Sea, which has become a flashpoint. Carter is in Tokyo and will also visit India this week. Yep.
Thanks, Don. Here are some world shorts from the Omaha World-Herald. From Stockholm, he won't be there in person, but the Nobel Foundation said Bob Dylan had written a speech that will be read at the traditional Nobel Prize banquet. Dylan, the winner of this year's Nobel Prize in Literature, declined the invitation to the December 10th prize ceremony and banquet, pleading other commitments. But the foundation said Monday that Dylan's speech will be read by a yet-to-be-decided person at the lavish banquet in Stockholm's City Hall. Dylan's diploma and medal will be handed over at a later date that hasn't been determined. From Mexico City, Mexico's president signed decrees creating 4 new biological reserves and 5 other protected areas Monday, setting aside about 160 million acres for environmental conservation. Enrique Peña Nieto's office said in a statement that it was the largest amount of land the country has ever decreed as environmentally protected. It also said Mexico joins a group of nations that have made a commitment to safeguard 10% of their maritime area. And finally, from Nairobi, Kenya, at least 87 patients escaped from Kenya's only psychiatric hospital after they were left unattended when medical workers at public hospitals went on strike nationwide, officials said Monday. They scaled up the walls surrounding the wards and they just wandered away, said Dr. Julius Odego, medical superintendent at Mathan National Teaching and Referral Hospital. I'm sorry, that must be Mathari. 17 patients had been returned to the hospital by Monday evening, he said, and I am very optimistic. Before long, all of them will be back. Around 5,000 doctors from public hospitals nationwide did not report to work Monday, officials said. Medical workers want better pay and working conditions.
Well, here's some national news. The November election put Republicans in full control of a record number of state legislatures around the country, a level of power that gives the party an unprecedented opportunity: change the U.S. Constitution. Republicans already control Congress, the White House, and more governors' offices than they have in nearly a century. But it's the state legislatures that hold perhaps the greatest promise for lasting change. The GOP now holds numerical majorities in 33 legislatures, one shy of the two-thirds required to initiate a convention on constitutional amendments. There is no credible talk of using that power for amendments on hot-button social issues such as banning abortion or gay marriage, but conservatives have a list of bread-and-butter governing issues they would like to see enshrined in the Constitution. One, to require a balanced federal budget, is already approaching the level of support that would trigger a convention. Beyond that, a major state-level push is planned during 2017 for a constitutional convention that could also consider amendments to impose term limit on members of Congress and rein in various federal powers. President-elect Donald Trump has pledged support for an amendment on congressional term limits. The possibility of constitutional change is in the air, said law professor Jeffrey Rosen, president and CEO of the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, a nonprofit museum that is hosting academic debates and symposiums about the efforts to amend the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution has been amended 27 times since it was ratified in 1788, and its Article 5 spells out two ways to propose amendments. By a two-thirds vote of each member of each chamber, the U.S. House and Senate can refer an amendment to the states. On two-thirds of the state legislators, two-thirds of the state legislatures can also request that Congress call a convention of the states. Both scenarios require three-fourths of the states, or 38, to ratify an amendment before it takes effect. If the supporters of a balanced budget amendment succeed, it would be the first time in the nation's history that states initiated the process. That scenario has become more likely as a result of the November election. It takes 34 states to trigger a convention for constitutional amendments, meaning a unified Republican push would need the help of only a few Democrats in a single state to reach the mark. The overwhelming success of one political party at the state level is something of a real constitutional significance, said Akil Reed Amar, a constitutional law professor at Yale University. Every state except Vermont has some sort of balanced budget requirement, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. The U.S. government does not, but not everyone agrees that's a problem. During recessions, for example, federal government spending can help drive the economy even if it means spending at a deficit. 28 state legislatures already have approved measures calling for a convention to propose a federal balanced budget requirement, although they use a variety of terms that could raise legal questions about whether they all count toward the threshold. Organizers at the nonprofit Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force have lined up sponsors in 9 additional Republican-led legislatures: Arizona, Idaho, Kentucky, Minnesota, Montana, South Carolina, Virginia, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. with the goal of reaching the two-thirds threshold in 2017. But Republican control is no guarantee of success. A Wyoming measure calling for a convention on a balanced budget amendment was shelved in 2015 after the state Senate altered it to make it contingent on assurances that Wyoming would not see a reduction in federal revenue. Montana's Republican-led House overwhelmingly defeated a resolution calling for a convention on balanced budget amendment when it last met in 2015. Opponents expressed fears of a runaway convention during which delegates might propose all types of possible amendments. Similar fears have thwarted past attempts at passing a balanced budget amendment. The movement peaked at 32 states when Missouri passed a resolution calling for a convention in 1983, then dipped to about half that as numerous states rescinded their resolutions. The tally began growing again after Republicans swept into the control of many capitals in 2010. The possibility of a convention dominated by delegates from a single party is alarming, said Carolyn Fiddler, a spokeswoman for the National Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. There are no rules. They can just throw out the whole Constitution if they want to, Fiddler said. It's the wildest of Wild West situations. Supporters of a balanced budget amendment hope to allay such fears by convening this coming summer in Nashville, Tennessee, to propose rules and procedures for a future convention on constitutional amendments. They contend a convention is unlikely to veer off into contentious issues such as abortion and gun rights because amendments ultimately will need bipartisan appeal to win ratification from 38 states. The mere possibility of a state-initiated convention has been enough to prompt Congress to action in the past. With states just shy of the two-thirds mark in 1912, Congress instead wrote its own amendment requiring senators to be elected by a vote of the people rather than through state legislatures. The states then ratified the amendment. But Congress has repeatedly fallen short of the two-thirds vote needed to refer a balanced budget amendment to the states. The last time both chambers tried was in 2011.
Thanks, Don. From the World Herald, the headline reads, Trump's unpredictable starting now foreign policy. From Washington, more than 6 weeks before his inauguration, President-elect Donald Trump is already carrying out his promise to make U.S. foreign policy less predictable with a series of moves that are keeping America's adversaries as well as its friends off balance. In the span of a week, Trump slammed China over currency and trade, had an unprecedented call with Taiwan's leader, praised the Philippine president's violent war on drugs, and promised to visit Pakistan, effectively upending years of foreign policy. Even when new presidents want to change policies, they are usually careful to adhere to the strict and deliberately stilted language of diplomacy, which exists to prevent misunderstandings that can lead to unintended consequences. The president-elect is showing a pretty dramatic departure from traditional practice, said Aaron David Miller, Vice President for New Initiatives at the Wilson Center and a former advisor at the State Department. When I look at what appears to be the emerging Trump foreign policy, I see a lot of unpredictability when it comes to process, he said. Trump is also doing all this without a nominee for Secretary of State to advise him or to explain his thinking to foreign governments and their advisors behind the scenes. Some experts say Trump's strategy echoes that of President Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger, who served as his national security advisor and then as Secretary of State. They sought advantage in world affairs by keeping other leaders guessing about Nixon's intentions. Nixon toyed with the idea that he could affect international relations with his madman theory, the idea he could convince overseas leaders that he was unpredictable and irrational, said Nicholas Eberstad, the Henry Wendt Chair in Political Economy at the American Enterprise Institute. Donald Trump is in a lot better position to leverage the madman theory than Nixon was. What most concerns some critics is the possibility that Trump may be making decisions hastily or without thinking about the broader consequences of decisions such as taking the call from Taiwan. In dismissing the significance of this exchange, they failed to recognize that process and people are policy when you're President of the United States, said Mira Rapp Hooper, a senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security and Asian Policy Coordinator for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. A phone call to interact with a particular figure, especially of this significance, is going to be interpreted as policy. Trump's chat with Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen on Friday initially prompted a muted protest from Beijing, which regards the island as its territory. But his continued criticism of China, he accused the country of devaluing its currency and building a massive military complex in the middle of the South China Sea in Twitter postings on Sunday, may provoke a stronger reaction. Trump presaged his own actions during the campaign. He lambasted Republican national security experts and criticized Obama's slow and steady approach when he outlined his foreign policy strategy in a speech in April. "We must, as a nation, be more unpredictable," Trump said in the speech. "We are totally predictable. We tell everything. We're sending troops. We tell them. We're sending something else. We have a news conference. We have to be unpredictable, and we have to be unpredictable starting now." Trump's election is one more sign of how unpredictable global events are these days. More than anything else, though, the freewheeling nature of Trump's approach has played out with the search to choose a Secretary of State. The very public process, with Trump, his surrogates, and the contenders all commenting, has been compared to episodes of Trump's former television show, The Apprentice, rather than the selection of the nation's top diplomat. "I've never seen anything like that before," Miller said, "and I worked for half a dozen Secretaries of State."
From Madagascar, anyone who finds a piece of debris from a Malaysia Airlines plane that is believed to have crashed in the southern Indian Ocean in 2014 could receive a financial reward, relatives of those who were on the plane said Monday in Madagascar. A group of relatives who traveled to the island nation off the southeast coast of Africa made the offer in hopes that residents will scour some coastal areas of Madagascar where possible parts of flight MH370 washed ashore. Meanwhile, a Malaysian official investigating the disappearance of the Boeing 777 was in Madagascar's capital to pick up debris that has already been found and will be analyzed to see if it came from aircraft. Malaysia, Australia, and China are close to completing a deep-sea sonar search, so far unsuccessful, of 120,000 square kilometers, that's 46,000 square miles, off Australia's southwest coast in the Indian Ocean. They say they will suspend operations if there is no new evidence that could help pinpoint the crash site. Relatives of the missing believe the search should continue.
Thanks, Don. Well, it's 10:19, so we're going to switch now to local and legislative news. The headline on the front page of the Midland section of the Omaha World Herald says, "State sees need to invest in infrastructure." Lincoln, Nebraska's road building projects could get a boost if President-elect Donald Trump moves forward with his campaign push for infrastructure spending, a state official said Monday. Kyle Schneeweiss, director of the Nebraska Department of Roads, told a panel of state lawmakers that he'd welcome the investment in the state's road system from the federal government. Trump has floated a $1 trillion plan to upgrade the nation's infrastructure system that includes roads, bridges, and airports. How federal dollars are used in Nebraska would depend on the federal requirements, Schneeweiss said. "I can tell you that we would deliver on whatever those requirements are," he said. The department has identified state road construction projects for the next 2 decades, totaling $11.6 billion in today's dollars. Schneeweiss told the legislature's Appropriations and Transportation Committees. Adjusted for inflation, the total would be $16.6 billion. The figure accounts for maintaining the road system, including the repair and replacement of pavement and bridges, modernizing the system, including safety and traffic flow projects, and other upgrades that add capacity or support economic growth. It includes projects not under construction but planned or identified as a need in the future, he said. That includes those planned under the Transportation Innovation Act, which will fund the construction of unfinished expressways through 2033. The act also will help fund county bridge repairs and economic development-related transportation projects. The $450 million initiative, which was approved earlier this year, is funded with $400 million from a 6-cent per gallon increase in the gas tax approved by lawmakers in 2015 and $50 million from the state's cash reserve fund. The state has seen enthusiasm for the program. In its initial round, the grant-matching county bridge portion received more than 80 proposals for an estimated $22 million in projects. The initial round, however, provides just $4 million. More than 2,100 of the state's county bridges are classified as structurally deficient. Because needs always surpass available funding, the Roads Department is working to find efficiencies to ensure that as much funding gets into the pavement as possible, said Schweiss, who joined the department a year and a half ago. About $500 million, mostly from state motor fuel taxes and federal highway funding, is currently available in the next fiscal year for the projects, putting Nebraska in an enviable position for roads funding compared to neighboring states, he said. The department has started using a design-build method in which a single company provides both design and construction services to tighten a project's timeline. Meanwhile, 2 years ago, the department's average time to get a maintenance project from concept to construction was 38 months, he said. Last year, the department trimmed that to 35 months. It's still too long for my taste, he said. We need to keep going.
From Lincoln, the city council will hold off on approving the Lincoln Children's Zoo expansion plans for at least a week to make sure the project meets rules tied to previous grant funding. The city has accepted federal land and water conservation grants for projects in Antelope Park and Woods Park, money that comes with a federal requirement that the land benefiting from the grant remain in outdoor recreational use. The zoo expansion involves land in both park areas. The zoo's expansion plans and additional parking in the Antelope Park Triangle have been okayed, said Nicole Fleck-Tews, Special Projects Administrator for the department. The zoo is considered outdoor recreational use, she said. The Parks and Recreation Department expects the city will need no federal approval for the small parcel of land, around a quarter acre, that is being converted to parking in Woods Park. But department staff are waiting for an answer. Fleck-Tews expects the council will vote on the zoo expansion and related projects at the December 12th meeting. The Children's Zoo is planning a $16 million expansion that will include new animal attractions, exhibits, and activity areas that will be open all year. The project also includes a new education and conservation center that will include space for the Lincoln Public Schools Science Focus program, known as the Zoo School. The zoo will be taking over the building that now houses Parks and Recreation administrative staff near 27th and A. The department will move into the third floor of the Department of Health building near 33rd and O, requiring some additional parking in Woods Park.
Thanks, Don. Here's an article about recycling. Old computers, unused TVs, and forgotten iPods can be recycled. And finding a place to get rid of those unwanted electronics in Nebraska should be easier now, thanks to a new public-private partnership announced Monday. The Consumer Technology Association and member companies such as Best Buy, Dell, HP, LG, Samsung, and Vizio have started a year-long pilot program in Nebraska to provide better access to recycling locations. A Nebraskan can now visit greenergadgets.org those are capital G's, greenerandgadgets.org, enter his or her zip code, and find nearby electronics recyclers. The companies have been offering electronic recycling in various ways, but this is an effort to combine some of those efforts and keep electronics out of landfills. The program aims to increase awareness of electronic recycling, increase opportunities for recycling, and make the process sustainable, said Walter Alcorn, a Consumer Technology Association official. The organization conducted a study that found recycling is important to 87% of Nebraskans, yet only 49% of adults in the state know where they can recycle electronics. The new partnership gives Nebraskans an opportunity to recycle and keep electronics out of landfills, which saves money in the long run, said outgoing State Senator Heath Mello of Omaha. Finding a way to reduce that e-waste going into landfills has a direct connection with saving property tax dollars across the state, Mello said.
Well, here's some items at a glance from around the state. Lincoln police have arrested a 25-year-old woman they say stabbed a 21-year-old woman in a fight early Monday near 4th and F Streets. Police called to the area on a report of gunshots at 1:40 a.m. Found the woman had been stabbed 10 times in the back and torso with a 3-inch knife, Officer Katie Flood said. She suffered non-life-threatening injuries and knew her attacker, police said. A dispute over exchanges on social media preceded the stabbing. Late Monday, the police identified the suspect as Tara Paulson. She was booked in jail on suspicion of second-degree assault and using a weapon to commit a felony. From Elgin, a 24-year-old pickup driver has died in a collision with a semi-trailer near Elgin in Antelope County. Authorities said the accident occurred Friday when the eastbound pickup was hit by the northbound truck on Nebraska 14, about 2 miles north of Elgin. The pickup driver was identified as Drew Holter, who lived in Elgin. The semi-driver has been identified as Roy Rogers of Clearwater. It's not clear whether Rogers was injured. Central City. Authorities have confirmed the names of 2 17-year-old girls killed Saturday in a Merrick County crash. Grand Island Senior High School Communications Coordinator Jack Sherd said Cheyenne Urbauer of Grand Island and Shania Rivera, formerly of Grand Island, died in the accident. Sherd said Urbauer was a senior at the school and Rivera attended the school before moving to South Dakota. The one-car crash happened just before 2 a.m. Investigators think that the car was eastbound when it ran off the rural roadway. The driver overcorrected, causing the car to roll several times before landing in a roadside ditch. The doesn't say whether they were wearing seatbelts or not. 2 Minnesotans are in jail after the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office says they found 100 pounds of pot and a loaded gun in their SUV Saturday morning. Chief Deputy Todd Duncan said Averill Theo, 51, was driving east on Interstate 80 when he was stopped just before 10 a.m., a mile from the Waverly exit, for following too closely. After the deputy told the pair he smelled weed, Theo and his passenger, Crystal Lee, 42, told him they had some pot in their Hummer, Duncan said. A search turned up 110 pounds of pot covered in tinfoil and placed in plastic totes, Duncan said. Deputies also found a loaded gun, Duncan said, adding there was no round in the chamber. Theo was also wanted on an arrest warrant out of California, Duncan said. Both were arrested on suspicion of possession of marijuana with the intent to deliver. From Omaha, an author who unsuccessfully sued the state for access to a serial killer's prison drawings has published the artwork of John Joubert in a new book. The Nebraska Supreme Court refused last year to release the drawings Joubert made before his execution in 1996. Author Mark Pettit said Monday that a source provided him a copy of the drawings while his case was pending, but he waited to publish them until after Nebraskans voted to reinstate the death penalty this fall. Pettit is a former Omaha reporter who had previously written a book about Joubert and his crimes. Joubert was convicted of fatally stabbing two Bellevue area boys, ages 12 and 13, weeks apart in 1983. He was also convicted of killing an 11-year-old boy in Maine in 1982. And finally, from Lincoln, the Lincoln YMCA Giving Tree Program is seeking toy donations to provide each of the 400 students at Elliott Elementary with a gift this year. At Elliott, 92% of the students qualify for free or reduced lunches. The central Lincoln neighborhood near 25th and O Streets is home to a diverse range of lower income families. The YMCA leads the Community Learning Center at Elliott, an after-school and summer program aimed at keeping students safe, learning, and active while supporting their families. Thanks to donors, the YMCA is also able to give a few of the most in need families boxes of food and clothing. People interested in contributing are invited to select a paper ornament from a giving tree at any Lincoln YMCA. Then they should purchase an age-appropriate gift of less than $20. Bring gifts unwrapped to the front desk of any YMCA by Friday. For more information, go to ymcalincoln.org/givingtree. Deb?
Thanks, Don. This is Matthew Hansen's column in the Omaha World Herald. The 8-year-old girl sat and watched the old woman dying. She watched as the sun went down and the old woman grew weaker and the doctor did not come. She watched in the darkness as the old Omaha Indian woman struggled and the white doctor was summoned a second time, a third time, a fourth, and still he did not come. 8-year-old Susan LaFleche sat there into the early morning in the year 1873. She watched the old woman take her final breath, and she made a decision, a vow that changed the course of her own life and the course of countless other lives, too. Her conclusion was that the old woman died because she was just an Indian, says University of Nebraska-Lincoln professor Joe Starita, author of the new and stunning biography of this little-known American hero, Susan LaFleche. Those were her own words. It was only an Indian, and it did not matter. That incident stayed with Susan to the point that she decided to spend the rest of her life doing whatever she could so that no Omaha Indian would die an agonizing death without somebody there to tend to her. So here's what Susan LaFleche did. Born in a buffalo hide teepee and raised in a remote village 70 miles north of Omaha, she left her family and her tribe, traveled to faraway New Jersey, then Virginia, and then the dizzying metropolis of Philadelphia. She finished second in her class at what's now Hampton University. She fought her way into one of the few medical schools in the world that would take women. She finished first in her medical school class. She became the first Native American to graduate from medical school. She did this in 1889, 31 years before women could vote and 35 years before Indians were recognized as American citizens. Then she turned down prestigious job offers, a potential life of fame in New York or maybe Paris. She took a train back to Nebraska, and she took a job as the only doctor tending to Omaha Indian patients spread across 1,350 square miles. And that, believe it or not, is just the beginning of a remarkable story that most of us have never heard. It's a hero's journey, an American odyssey largely hidden in plain sight for a century, and it happened right here in Nebraska. If she would have done this anywhere between Chicago and New York, she would be on a $20 bill, Starita says. That's not even really hyperbole. That is probably true. Starita, a UNL journalism professor and one of Nebraska's most popular nonfiction authors, has set about making Susan LaFleche into a household name with his new book, A Warrior of the People. A former Miami Herald investigative reporter, Starita weaves skillfully through the singular life of Susan LaFleche Picot. He takes us along as Dr. Sue rides a buggy over the frozen Great Plains, fighting through sub-zero temperatures and whiteout blizzards to care for desperately ill elders and sick kids. She mounts public health campaigns to eliminate communal drinking cups, promote screen doors that keep out disease-ridden flies, and warn against the evils of alcohol abuse. As years become decades, as the doctor has her own children, her own health problems, and suffers the untimely death of her husband, she succeeds in making the Omaha Indians healthier and extending their lives. That isn't all. She also creates a library and promotes education and organizes quilting circles while urging the preservation of the Omaha culture, and teaches Sunday school and presides over church services while extolling the virtues of faith. She advocates for her people, fights for them in countless letters and meetings with politicians in Lincoln and Washington, D.C. That isn't all. In 1913, LaFleche realized a lifelong dream. She raised money and opened a modern hospital on a hill overlooking her hometown of Walled Hill. There, she tended pregnant women and sick patients of every race and creed until her own death 2 years later. A single widowed woman built a modern hospital without a single tax dollar on an Indian reservation in 1913, said Starita. That was unheard of then. That's unheard of now. That's insane. And that still isn't all, argues Starita, who believes that Susan LaFleche's importance to the Omaha tribe went far beyond checkups or hospitals. If you pull back and look at the helicopter view of her life, what you see in its totality on the medical front, the political front, the social front, the spiritual front, you see a woman whose foremost contribution to her people was giving them hope in places where hope was often so hard to find, Starita says. That's the helicopter view. She gave them hope. Even as she did all this, LaFleche struggled with things that seem oh so familiar in 2016. She was paid far less than her male counterparts. She struggled to balance career and family, working punishing hours while also tending to her elderly mother and caring for her young children. She was flying solo in a world where she had a lot of anxieties, a lot of fears, while trying to achieve this very delicate balance between caregiver and caretaker, Starita says. And I think there are a whole lot of women in the opening years of this century who have found themselves in exactly that spot. And LaFleche's letters and her pleas to politicians are infused with the belief she began to form at age 8 as she witnessed the death of an elderly member of her tribe, a belief that her people would be forever treated worse than other people unless she did something to change it. In 1873, Susan saw firsthand evidence that from a certain vantage point, her vantage point, it appeared that Indian lives didn't matter, Starita says. If you look through the lens of Standing Rock, through the lens of White Clay right now, you can still say that the question is very much up for grabs. Starita's last book, I Am a Man, told the story of Standing Bear, the Ponca chief, who fought for equality inside an Omaha courthouse and eventually won the right to be considered a man in the eyes of the law. That book prominently featured Susan's older and arguably better-known sister, Suzette LaFleche, more commonly known as Bright Eyes, who served as Standing Bear's interpreter and confidant during and after the trial. I Am a Man has sold 20,000 copies to date and was named the state's One Nebraska selection in 2012. But A Warrior of the People may be more important because it tells us a story hardly anyone knows. Yes, Susan LaFleche Picot is in the Nebraska Hall of Fame. And yes, Omaha's Picot Elementary is named after her. But Starita makes a compelling case that Susan LaFleche deserves far more than that she deserves a place alongside the country's Native American heroes and its women's rights activists, too, after living a life every bit as earth-shattering as Standing Bear or Rosa Parks. Susan LaFleche understood that the purpose of life was not to try to avoid pain and suffering. That was hopeless, Starita said. Susan believed that the purpose of life was to find a purpose and then to find the courage to live out that purpose. That is what she did every day in her life. That's her truth.
Thanks, Deb. Nebraska's snowplows are sporting some extra brains behind their blades this season. The state is outfitting all of its 697 plow trucks with technology to track them while they move and monitor the amount of salt and brine they spread during winter storms. The technology has been installed in about 200 trucks so far and should be deployed statewide by next winter. The goal is to make better use of Nebraska's vast, taxpayer-owned highway clearing resources. Last winter, the State Department of Roads spent more than $6 million on salt and nearly $5 million on other anti-icing or ice melting products, although some of that was saved for future seasons. Keeping tabs on the use of de-icers will help ensure those materials are spread evenly and effectively across the state's 10,000 miles of highways, said Tom Renninger, Assistant Manager of Operations at the Roads Department. Now, he said, we're actually going to know how much material we're applying. The upgrades are part of a 5-year, $6 million contract with Parsons Corp for a so-called maintenance decision support system that uses weather forecasts to recommend the type and quantity of material crews should use to treat roads. It's among the more significant, albeit less visible, upgrades being made as part of ongoing efforts to modernize Nebraska's road clearing operations. Other changes are visible from the car window. Roger Callwarth hopes drivers don't do double takes when they see a normal plow dragging one of its new tow plows along Interstate 80 or another wide stretch of road this winter. The tow blades attach to the rear of a truck and clear snow from an adjacent traffic lane, allowing a single truck to cover 2 lanes at once, one with its standard front end plow and the other with the tow plow. Each tow plow costs about $105,000. This year, the Roads Department has 26 of them ready to roll. Callwarth has 11 in his area, District 1, including 3 new tow plows being used this year to clear US 77 south of Lincoln and Nebraska 2 east of Palmyra. It's a fantastic move as far as for the traveling public because we're wiping out 2 lanes instead of 1. That makes a heck of a difference, he said. And if winter packs a wallop that plows can't clear, the state can test another tool at its disposal. This year, the Roads Department installed remote control gates for closing on-ramps at 8 spots along Interstate 80, including I-80, 27th Street, and 56th Street interchanges in Lincoln, and the Waverly interchange. The gates feature railroad-type crossing arms and signs with flashing lights and can be triggered miles away with the push of a button. That keeps plow operators in their trucks clearing roads during serious storms. The other 4 interchanges with remote control gates are in the North Platte area. Gates will be replaced at about 70 remaining interchanges between Wyoming and the Omaha area within 2 years at a cost of about $8 million. Omaha wasn't included because its high traffic volume means the interstate there rarely closes. Roads officials are always looking for ways to improve safety while saving taxpayer money, said Renninger. For example, installing GPS tracking devices in every truck will allow dispatchers to quickly summon the nearest plow to a slick spot following a crash. They can prevent an additional accidents and keep other plow operators from traveling unnecessary miles. Everything we do on the road reflects man hours, Renninger said. Our number one priority is we want every customer that's driving our highway systems to get home safely, and then we want to build efficiencies into that.
Those all sound like pretty good ideas.
Yeah, they do. Real good ideas.
Pardon me, here's a very short story from Lincoln from the Associated Press. 4 beer stores in White Clay are reapplying for licenses to sell alcohol in the unincorporated village next to South Dakota's Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. The Nebraska Liquor Control Commission received the applications late last week. In November, the commission ordered the 4 stores to reapply and demonstrate that they can meet state requirements such as providing adequate law enforcement. The village, with a dozen residents, sold the equivalent of 3.5 million cans of beer last year. The Pine Ridge Indian Reservation bans alcohol, but is plagued by alcoholism. Commission Executive Director Hobart Rupi said the reapplications will first go before the Sheridan County Board. If the board recommends against the renewals, or if 3 county residents file a protest, the applications will go to the Liquor Control Commission.
Well, okay, it's 10:45, and I guess we could get started, or 10:46, get started on this week's funeral arrangements and death notices. And I'll begin with those found in the Lincoln Journal-Star. The first is for Bonaker, Bernice L. Bonaker, age 96, of Lincoln. Roper and Sons can provide you with the details. Brandfuss, Richard Dick, nicknamed Dick W. Brandfuss. Dick was 82, from Lincoln. Was a Navy Korean War veteran. Memorials to the Capital Humane Society. Buthurst, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home will be handling the arrangements. Clark, James R. Clark, age 84, of Crete. Memorials are in care of the family. Council Funeral Home in Crete, handling the arrangements. Dyer, Donald D. Dyer of Lincoln. So far, we don't have any age or any other additional information. I'm sure it's on its way. Fees, F as in Frank, E-E-S-E. James Kenneth Jim Fees. Jim was 82 years old, of Minnetonka, Minnesota. He graduated from the University of Nebraska in 1956. He was born in Hastings. That's the Nebraska connection. In lieu of flowers, please donate to a charity of your choice and share with the family. No funeral home has been provided. The memorial service is at Christ Presbyterian Church of Edina, Minnesota. That's Thursday, December 8th. Grice, G-R-I-E-S-S. Linda Grice, age 62, of Lincoln. Memorial contributions to the family for later designation. Buthurst, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home in Lincoln are handling the details. Sharon Harms, age 76, of Lincoln. Wyuka Funeral Home is handling the details. Cager, K-J-E-R, Galen Bill Cager, age 87, of Lincoln. It just says here, a memorial service at a later date. No other information is available. Copland, Gloria Dawn Copland, age 79, formerly of Wayne, Nebraska. Died at her home in Lincoln. Maiden name was Feifel, P-F-E-I-L. Memorials are the family's choice. Haseman Funeral Home in Wayne, Nebraska can provide you with more details. Lembrick, Daryl Dell Lembrick was 86 years old, a retired officer of the United States Army. Memorials suggested to the Wounded Warrior Project. Buthurst, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home in Lincoln, handling the details. Lichty, L-I-C-H-T-I, Alan Lee Lichty, age 65, of Kearney. Farmer and Sons of Geneva, it says. That must be the funeral home. Donna Marcel Reisdorf was the maiden name, age 51, ardent and artist and resident of Bremerton, Washington. Graduated from Battle Creek High School in '83. Donna was cremated. Funeral services will be at St. Mary's Church on December 7th in Norfolk. Mastera, Beatrice M. Mastera, age 98, of David City. Maiden name is Svoboda. Crachel Funeral Chapel in David City can provide you with the details. Nieper, Marianne Rose Nieper of Kansas City, Kansas, age 81. More information to follow. Nunnenkamp, Frederick G. Nunnenkamp, age 99, of Sutton. A service veteran. Memorials are to be directed to the Sutton EMS or Nebraska Evangelical Lutheran High School. Military graveside services will be conducted from the Sutton Cemetery by the American Legion Argonne Post number 61. No funeral home has been provided. Saithoff, Lorene A. Saithoff, age 82, of Hebron. Memorials in care of the family in lieu of flowers. Kroll Funeral Home can give you more information. Stutzman, Beulah K. Boots, nickname of Boots. Boots Stutzman was 90 years old, from Lincoln. You can get information on the funeral from Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Watkins, Larry A. Watkins, age 78. No other information is available at this time. Wentlant, Diane L. Wentlant of Falls City, age 67. No other information available as of today, this morning. And then we have West. The final notice in today's Journal Star is for Donna L. West, age 70. It says memorials are suggested to the Holy Trinity Episcopal Church or the Lincoln Public Schools Foundation. Buttress, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home can provide you with any details. And those, Deb, are today's notices in the Journal Star.
Thanks, Don. Now we'll turn to those obituaries in the Omaha World Herald. The first one is for Brown, Robert R. Bob Brown. Mr. Brown was a veteran. He was 74 years old. The services will be Wednesday at 10 a.m. at the Bel Air Chapel of Heafy Hoffman. Military honors will be provided by the Benson VFW Post 2503. Memorials are asked to the Bennington Fire and Rescue or St. Pius X Catholic Church, Heafy Hoffman. Bykirk, Lori Lynn Gertis Bykirk. Dr. Bykirk was 69. She was from Omaha. The services will be Wednesday, December the 7th at 2 p.m. at Morning Star Lutheran Church on South 85th Avenue. In lieu of flowers, the family requests memorials to the Lori Bykirk Scholarship Fund for UNO political science students at the University of Nebraska Foundation. Heafy Hoffman, Dora Cutler. Chisholm, retired Staff Master Sergeant Edward S. Ed Chisholm Jr. He was in the Air Force. He was 76 years old. The funeral service will be at 10 o'clock Friday, December 9th at Bellevue Memorial Funeral Chapel. Memorials are asked to the American Cancer Society. Connolly, Marilyn Joy Minster Connolly, aged 86. The memorial service will be Thursday, 11 o'clock at the Reichmuth Funeral Home on West Maple Street. Private burial, memorials to Life Care of Elkhorn or the Visiting Nurses Association. Crater, Velma I. Crater, age 67. Services will be Tuesday at 11 a.m. at John A. Gentleman on the 72nd Street Chapel. Drake, William Drake Jr., age 89, of Bella Vista, Arkansas. Lucas Funeral Home. It says Lucas Funeral Home Keller. Oh, it's in Keller, Texas, is in charge of arrangements. Exley, Barbara Jean Exley, 69, of Fort Calhoun. The funeral service will be 10 o'clock Wednesday the 7th at the Seavers Sprick Funeral Home. Memorials are suggested to the Exley family. Forsland, Anne Dorothy Forsland, maiden name Fuchek. A complete notice, she was 97. A complete notice will follow from West Lawn Hillcrest. Frederickson, Mary L. Frederickson, 73. The celebration of Mary's life will be Thursday, December 8th at 10 a.m. at Braemen Mortuary, the Southwest Chapel. Memorials asked to Make-A-Wish Foundation. Lyle A. Freeberg, aged 85. A complete notice will follow from Heath Hoffman, Doric Cutler. Friend, Robert B. Friend, age 78. The services will be at 10:30 in the morning, Wednesday, at St. Wenceslas Catholic Church. John A. Gentleman is in charge of arrangements. Hedrick, Margaret A. Hedrick, aged 88, of Omaha. Celebration of Margaret's life will be held Wednesday, December 7th at 11 a.m. at Covenant Presbyterian Church on 150th and Blondo. Memorials are asked to that church, Covenant Presbyterian, or the Nebraska Humane Society. Braemen Mortuary is in charge of arrangements. Helwig, Larry E. Helwig, 68 years old. Mr. Helwig was a veteran of the Vietnam War. Funeral service will be Thursday at 10:30 at Collard Doltz Mortuary. In lieu of flowers, memorials are asked to Larry Helwig, LVAD Memorial Foundation. Collard Doltz is in charge of arrangements. Hickerson, Diane K. Hickerson, 74. A complete notice will follow from John A. Gentleman. Holbrook, Ray E. Holbrook, aged 86, of Omaha. Mr. Holbrook was a veteran. Celebration of life will be 11 o'clock Monday, the 12th, at Braemen Mortuary. Cracher, or Craker, maybe, Cracher, Robert E. Cracher, Jr., age 68. There will be a vigil service at 7 p.m. at the Bel Air Chapel of Heaphy Hoffman and a massive Christian burial Wednesday at 10 a.m. at St. Joan of Arc Catholic Church. Memorials are asked to the Methodist Esterbrook Cancer Center or St. Peregrine Ministry. Heaphy Hoffman, Doric Cutler. Langenegger, Robert Michael Langenegger, 46, of Omaha. Celebration of Robert's life will be Thursday the 8th at 10:30 at Braemen Mortuary, the 72nd Street Chapel. Memorials are asked to Maple Crest Health Center, the Chapel Project. Lewis, Roger L. Lewis, age 75. Mr. Lewis was a veteran of the Air Force. The funeral will be 1 o'clock Friday, December 9th, with visitation 1 hour before. The funeral will be at 1 o'clock on the 9th. Forest Lawn Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Lombard, Thomas A. Lombard, age 77. Memorial service will be Thursday, December 8th at 11 o'clock at First Lutheran Church on South 31st Street in Omaha. Memorials are asked to First Lutheran Church. Heaphy Hoffman, Doric Cutler. Matthews, Michael L. Matthews, 63 years old. Services will be Friday at 11 a.m. at the Bel Air Chapel, and a more complete notice will follow from Heaphy Hoffman. Padavina, Joseph Padavina Sr., otherwise known as Joe, age 91. Mr. Padavina was a veteran. The massive Christian burial will be Saturday at 10:30 at St. Margaret Mary Catholic Church, and a more complete notice will follow from Heaphy Hoffman. Joy Elaine Reh, or maybe Ray, R-E-H, 63, of Council Bluffs. It was Joy's wish to be cremated and private services will be held. The family will direct memorial contributions. Cutler O'Neill Meyer Woodring of the Bayless Park Chapel is in charge of arrangements. Sheridan, Claudia V. Sheridan, 80. A complete notice will follow from Heaphy Hoffman. Sprague, Roberta A. Sprague, aged 81. The funeral service will be Thursday at 10 o'clock at West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home, 57th and Center. Swanson, James Swanson, otherwise known as Jim, 85 years old, of Omaha. Mr. Swanson was a veteran. The service will be 1 o'clock Thursday, December 8th at Roeder Mortuary. In lieu of flowers, memorials are asked to Trinity Lutheran Church or to their family. Thiessen, Dean Thiessen, age 72. Mr. Thiessen was a vet. Memorial services Friday at 11 a.m. at Collard Doltz Mortuary in Papillion. Tippery, Lyle Donald Tippery, 91, of Decatur. Memorial service will be 2 o'clock Thursday, December the 8th at the United Methodist Church in Decatur. Memorials asked to the United Methodist Church, the Decatur Museum, the Decatur Fire and Rescue, the Weigel Williamson Center for Visual Rehabilitation. Peelan Funeral Services in Tacoma is in charge of arrangements. Vandry, John D. Vandry, age 72. Services will be Thursday at 1 o'clock at the Bel Air Chapel of Heafy Hoffman. Memorials are asked to Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church. Waite, Billy F. Waite, 87. Mr. Waite was a veteran. The funeral service will be Thursday at 11 o'clock at the Lucarisko Larkin Staskowitz Funeral Home. Memorials are asked to Judson Baptist Church. Week, Marilyn Ann Rotella Week, aged 81. The Mass of Christian Burial will be Wednesday at 11 at Holy Cross Catholic Church. Memorials to Catholic Social Services in Lincoln, Heafy Hoffman, Dora Cutler. And finally, Womeldorf, Jean E. Womeldorf, aged 94. Memorial service will be 1 o'clock Thursday, December the 8th at John A. Gentleman Mortuaries, the Bellevue Chapel. Memorials to the American Cancer Society or the Alzheimer's Association.
Thank you, Deb. Well, it's 11:01. Time for us to take our
Broadcast.
morning break here. Everyone, before we do, however, that listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
And thank you very much for that, and thank you, Deb Beatty, for being the first hour from today's newspapers. We'll be back after we have said a little break, and the first thing we need to do is to play the home delivery meal menu.
Do you have anything for
information here with the senior home delivery menu today is Ann Pelican. Welcome, Ann.
entertainment and that sort of thing?
A story about a ginger, it's in business, but there's a story of gingerbread houses in the lobby of the Magnolia Hotel. I have, of course, Amy. What did you want? Living?
I just have those doctors.
I have a story about Fremont having white lights in their home windows.
And now there's an expanded version that happens to be on the bookshelf in the afternoon from around 1 p.m. Central Time. You can hear the menu again.
Sotheby's has a new forensics lab, so it can test the authenticity of its stuff.
Now, here's Ann Pelican once again to tell us about our first Christmas movie coming up this Saturday.
I have a recipe for roasted cauliflower.
I guess I can read about the woman from Lincoln is the fire brigade. I don't know what else I got. I don't have anything.
Well, what about your doctors? You
Well, I
have
got the doctors. That's it.
You don't have Ask Amy?
I got Amy, but do you need it?
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay.
This is actually just came up new for the description movies.
I bet they like listening to Amy. Don't you suppose that people,
What?
people probably like listening to Amy?
Yes.
When I actually watched this movie,
I think they read that right after the first the obituaries, then the comics, then Amy.
Hallmark, there is described, and I hope everyone enjoys. So please, I ask everyone to tune in Saturday, December the 10th at 6:30 p.m. for Saturday Night the Movies, when I will be presenting the Christmas.
The problem with this Fremont stories is all about the lights, you know. So
And we do too, Ann. Thank you for that. You are tuned to the Radio Talking Book Network in Nebraska, very proudly serving our blind and visually impaired listeners now for over 42 years. The Radio Talking Book Network is brought to you with the cooperation of KIOS-FM in Omaha and statewide through the facilities
that's
of
business.
ET.
What a nice story for business.
Now let's return to our excellent readers for the second hour of the reading from the Omaha World Herald and the Lincoln Journal-Star. Here once again are Don Van and Deb Beatty.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, listeners. Yes, we are back, and it's time for editorials, which we're going to begin with letters to the editors. And in the Lincoln Journal-Star, I have two letters today. The first is from, it's either Moni or Moni, M-O-N-I, and the last name is spelled U-S-A-S-Z, USAZ, or you says? Well, anyway, Moni or Moni from Lincoln, and that person writes, in the midst of post-election activities, climate change remains relevant. An article on the polar regions set on defrost, printed in the Journal Star on November 22nd, describes how much warmer temperatures in the Arctic are causing ice to decrease at a time of year when ice should be spreading. The more ice melts, the more the sea level rises, the more changes occur in weather patterns and ocean currents. There was also a great letter to the editor by Kevin Johnson in November 26th. Consider Environmental Impact was the name of it. He shared specific actions we can all take to lower our individual greenhouse gas emissions. These are all things we can and should do as individual citizens, but we also must join together and encourage our elected officials in Washington to do more, much more. Citizens Climate Lobby's carbon pricing solution, carbon fee and dividend, is an approach that can substantially lower carbon pollution, improve the economy, and create jobs. Carbon fee and dividend levies a price on carbon at the well or mine and rebates all the revenue back to American households. Senators Deb Fischer and Ben Sasse and our Representative Jeff Fortenberry need to hear from us, not once, but many times. They need to hear that climate change is an issue for Nebraskans, and we want them to be part of the solution in Washington. Laura Johnson from David City has the second letter in today's paper. It says, with the election behind us, I find it disturbing that this election has caused so much division in our country. Friends are fighting with friends and ending friendships. Family members are fighting with each other and refusing to ever talk again. I have friends who had differing views of the election and the results. Now they don't talk and want nothing to do with each other. I also won't talk politics with certain members of my family for those same reasons. I know what kind of fights we would get into. I don't understand how anyone can do that. Why are we fighting against each other? We should be coming together as a whole country. We should be fighting on the same side, no matter who we voted for. There shouldn't be a division of races, gender, or any other way there is division. We are all one race, the human race. I think it is about time that we all started acting like we are all one race. And that was Laura Johnson from David City. Deb.
Thanks, Don. Here are the letters to the Public Pulse and the Omaha World Herald. This first one is from James Lawrence of Omaha. Seems Nebraska has backed its citizens into another tax problem by kicking the can down the road yet again. I know a way that would bring in lots of tax revenue. Repeal the law requiring motorcyclists to wear helmets. I am a lifetime resident of Omaha and a motorcycle rider. I and the majority of my riding friends cross the Mormon Bridge on any warm weekend and ride in Iowa because we don't have to wear a helmet. The same is true in Kansas, Colorado, and South Dakota. Nebraska has some of the best riding roads in the Midwest, but in a way, we're forced to spend our money elsewhere. The choice of whether or not to wear a motorcycle helmet should be in the riders, not the states. Omaha. From Doug Arthur of Omaha. As usual, the Omaha Public Schools Board is trying to pass the buck to the teachers because middle school students are disrespectful, rude, foul-mouthed, ill-behaved, and violent in the classroom. I believe that the real problem is that the overworked teachers are not being supported by the board or by the parents or guardians of these children. Special training for teachers is not going to help in the long term because the problem is far bigger than the classroom. These kids are not stupid. They know what buttons to push to get what they want. If firm action is not taken soon, another group of children will be lost, and they will only add to the prison overcrowding problem in the very near future. Teachers only see these children for a few hours on school days, so where is the real problem? The school board needs to take action now, ask for help, and do their jobs. Our children's future is in their hands. Doug Arthur of Omaha. From Rick Madej of Omaha. That name is spelled Madej, so it might be Madej, I don't know. I'm amazed at the hypocrisy of President-elect Donald Trump concerning two dictators. Fidel Castro was a ruthless dictator who ruled his country with an iron fist, killing or imprisoning any citizen who defied his government. Vladimir Putin is a former KGB officer who rules his country with an iron fist, controlling the press and imprisoning dissidents, drug users, and gay people. Why does Trump find it acceptable to vilify Castro while praising the government of Putin? I find both of these dictators despicable and unworthy of any compliments or trust. Again, Rick Madej of Omaha. From Diane Ledoux of Omaha. I totally agree with Glenn Mackey's suggestion that Goodwill board members be replaced. She refers to an article, Goodwill Sparks Bad Will, in November 30th Public Pulse. I am grieved and angered that their behavior has harmed the employees and clients. I am a retired teacher who worked 39 plus years with children and young adults with multiple physical and mental challenges. Learning job skills was central to our students' education. In the 1980s, I accompanied many students to Goodwill for on-site job skills evaluation and training. I witnessed compassion from the Goodwill staff and the pride of success from our students. Eventually, it became too costly for us to participate. I have so many questions about this program. Why, if Goodwill receives government funding, are the schools charged to utilize this training? Where are the training classrooms? How many training clients have been hired by Goodwill? How many clients have actually been referred for hire to other businesses throughout the Omaha Council Bluffs area? Goodwill's mission states it is dedicated to helping people in need reach their full potential through learning and the power of work. I am offering to volunteer and serve on the board to steer this organization back to that promise. Again, Diane Ledoux of Omaha. And finally, the last letter in today's Public Pulse is from Pat Schneider of Omaha. Here we go again, talking about the poor kids who don't have backpacks. When I was a kid, we carried our books by hand. I saw real poverty, kids who were so emaciated they needed to be fed in order to be taught. Although I was not in that group, we were poor too. I ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches from kindergarten to high school. I usually had to tear the mold off the bread and scrape it off the jelly. I worked full-time and paid my way through college. For almost a half century, I have paid thousands of dollars a year in property taxes to educate these kids. So pardon me if I don't see the necessity to provide backpacks to kids. Again, Pat Schneider of Omaha.
Thanks, Deb. Well, let's find out what the Journal Star's editorial folks have to say today. State and county officials need to push the reset button and take a fresh look at the best way to transport juvenile offenders from jail to court in Lancaster County. Security has deteriorated drastically since the job was turned over to a private firm last year, local officials said. Since then, there have been dozens of occasions on which sheriff's deputies have needed to physically restrain teenagers who got bad news from a judge or had to chase youths who slipped out of handcuffs. Juvenile court Judge Reggie Ryder called the situation an absolute mess. At the root of the problem is a dispute between state government and the county over money. Transportation has been furnished by the Lancaster County Youth Services Center, but the center stopped on the grounds that transporting the juveniles to court is the state's responsibility. The state then contracted the Midwest Special Services, Inc. of Omaha at a cost of about $53 a round trip. Sheriff's Captain Jerry Whitty said, "I've never known anybody to escape youth services employees while they are in our building. It never happened, and now it's happening all the time. They have a couple of kids escape from one of their vans and run away." Juvenile Court Judge Roger Heidemann said that staff at the center have developed relationships with the juveniles and also have professional training. They know how to de-escalate situations that somebody who doesn't work with them day in and day out and isn't trained doesn't know how to do, he said. In addition to the security problems, Midwest Special Services doesn't always have drivers available, Sheriff's deputies sometimes get pressed into services, or judges are forced to reschedule hearings, meaning that families have to come back another day and juveniles spend more time in detention. Local property taxpayers can understand what motivates the Lancaster County Board to take a hard stand that the state should pay to transport the juveniles. It is famous for creating unfunded mandates. The costs end up being added to local property tax bills. The county thinks that housing and transportation costs should be separated. The state thinks that the transportation costs should be included in the state reimbursement of $276 per day to the county for housing a juvenile. From the comments of those involved with the situation, there doesn't seem to be any question that having the center staff resume transporting juvenile offenders to and from court is the best option for everyone involved. But the contract for the county to continue housing expired a year ago, and state and county officials remain at an impasse. Officials at both levels of government need to work harder to find common ground. As County Commissioner Bill Avery said, we have a moral obligation to these kids.
Thanks, Don. Here's the editorial from the World Herald today. The City of Omaha's Tourism Bureau has a smart idea: offer incentives to convention planners to help lure more big events to town. But the city's plan to create a nonprofit corporation to manage those incentives raises serious concerns about transparency. Keith Baxson, director of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, has proposed a council resolution to create a nonprofit agency to manage these incentives so that specific information about the offers, such as how much a particular convention planner receives, would be excluded from state public records requirements. If too much information is revealed, the city would lose its competitive edge, argue Baxson and City Finance Director Steve Curtis. It's an understandable concern. The convention business is fiercely competitive. But do the ends, however laudable, justify the means being proposed? Under this plan, a small board of city officials, the city finance director, the city attorney, and a city council member would spend city tax dollars behind closed doors with no public accountability. And would the proposed nonprofit corporation truly be a private entity? Consider an October 2015 opinion by the Nebraska Attorney General's office on whether a private nonprofit corporation should be subject to state open records and public meeting laws. The Attorney General's opinion was based on a four-pronged test laid out by the Nebraska Supreme Court: whether the entity performs a government function, the level of government funding, the extent of government involvement or regulation, and whether the entity was created by the government. Based on that test, it appears the proposed nonprofit would be considered public. It would exist to support the city-owned convention center, be fully funded by city tax dollars, be overseen by city officials, and be created by the city council. Baxson is eager to bring more and better conventions to Omaha, a worthy goal, but it's the city council's responsibility to exercise caution in creating such an unusual vehicle to protect the city's competitive edge. Baxson's proposal is scheduled for a vote as early as today. Council members would be wise to hold off on this decision for further review.
Thanks, Deb. Well, it's 11:19. Time to move on to the today's living and entertainment sections of the paper. And today we do not have Dr. K. We have a replacement for Dr. K. I don't know if Dr. K is no longer writing the column. If you've been a regular listener, you've known that we've been reading past articles and past columns from Dr. K, ones that were written even 3 and 4 years ago. So maybe this is a new one, a new group, a new duo here. It's Elizabeth Coe and Eve Glazier. And we'll see next week who shows up for our health column. But Elizabeth and Eve are on tap this week. And like Dr. K, they're going to respond to questions. The question is, I heard about a polio outbreak in Nigeria this summer. Might there be an outbreak here in the United States? Well, dear reader, polio is a crippling and sometimes fatal infectious disease that was once common in the U.S. Caused by the polio virus, the disease was widespread among children. During the 1940s and 50s, outbreaks caused spinal and respiratory paralysis in 15,000 sufferers each year. With potentially dire outcomes and no cure, polio became one of the most feared childhood diseases in the United States. That changed thanks to the development of the polio vaccine in the mid-1950s and to the success of our ongoing national vaccination program. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention states that polio has been eliminated in the U.S. In our country, vaccination programs have resulted in sharp decline in the number of polio cases, from 35,000 in 1953 to 5,300 4 years later. With the introduction of an oral vaccine in 1961, the number of new cases acquired in the U.S. continued to plummet. There have been no new cases of polio reported in the U.S. since 1979. The last known case of polio acquired outside the U.S. and imported into the country was in 1993. However, as you point out, polio remains a global concern. International health organizations have made polio vaccination a priority, with more than 2.5 billion children vaccinated worldwide since 1988. As a result, the overall number of new polio cases worldwide has dropped a remarkable 99%. In 10 countries, however, including Afghanistan, Syria, and Pakistan, vaccination programs have been difficult to implement and the disease continues to spread. And though Nigeria was declared polio-free in 2014, 2 new cases last August and a 3rd case in September have raised the alarm. World health organizations are now redoubling their efforts to implement ongoing vaccination programs. Is this polio epidemic a danger to the U.S.? The answer is no. Vaccination rates among adults are extremely high, and as long as parents continue to be vigilant about vaccinations and boosters for their children, we as a nation will remain immune to this terrible disease. According to CDC guidelines, children should be vaccinated with inactivated polio vaccine, IPV, 4 times. At 2 months of age, at 4 months of age, a dose between 6 and 18 months of age, and a booster dose between 4 and 6 years of age. Until this vaccination schedule is complete, children should not travel to an area where polio is still an active infection. Eradicating polio worldwide has been one of the most remarkable and successful international health initiatives. Its ongoing success depends on each one of us continuing to be vigilant about vaccination. Now, Eve Glazier is an MD and an MBA and is an internist and assistant professor of medicine at University of California, Los Angeles Health. Elizabeth Coe is an MD and is also an internist and primary care physician at UCLA Health. Deb?
Thanks. Here's an article on health in the Omaha World Herald's living section. It's by 2 women who are named Julie Luceraga and Wendy Pecoraro. Articles accost us from all directions, promising that we'll be beach ready in 30 days, that we'll take 10 years off our lives with this miracle injection, or that we'll burn fat and replace it with muscle. None of them have a plan for how to live our lives day in and day out the very best we can. We've all seen and admired those people who are aging wholeheartedly. They are those older folks with a twinkle in their eye and a ready smile, out in the world doing whatever it is they choose. We thought, that's how I want to be when I'm that age. No one wants to grow old poorly, but often we don't think about laying the groundwork while we're young and nothing hurts when we haven't had that first big health scare. The good news is you can start anytime and reap a host of benefits. There's so much you can do to improve your chances of living a long, healthy, vibrant life, but we've made these the top 5 for you. 1, exercise. This doesn't have to mean high-impact kickboxing or running. Just walk regularly and increase your distance and your speed over time. Lift some weights, preferably the Nautilus variety or exercise bands to lessen the chance of injury. Move with purpose a minimum of 5 days a week for the best benefit. Make at least one of those days a yoga or stretching day and keep your muscles long and lean and less prone to injury. 2, food. We're not fans of counting calories, mostly because life is too short and there are too many other important, exciting, fun things to do. In addition, there is great value in learning how to listen to your body's cues when you are hungry and when you are full, and what you really feel like eating. When you're trying to tune into your body in this way, sugar substitutes, simple carbohydrates, and processed foods create static. Limit them as much as possible, or they override your circuits and you just crave more of them. Eat real food and eat as much as your body wants. Try new recipes, stay away from the scale, and concentrate on healing your body. 3, sleep. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says insufficient sleep is associated with a number of chronic diseases and conditions, such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and depression, which threaten our nation's health. Aside from these, insufficient sleep is also responsible for motor vehicle and machine-related crashes, causing substantial injury and disability each year. Sleep is the newest vital sign. If you're having trouble falling asleep or you're waking up at the same time each night, talk to your healthcare provider about it. Everyone would benefit from turning down the lights and shutting off electronics. The blue light is too stimulating for the brain, 1 hour before going to bed. During this hour, you can read, have a warm cup of tea, and decompress from the day. A nightly routine signals your body that it's time to sleep. 4, play. Play is essential to live wholeheartedly, said Brené Brown, PhD, and best-selling author. A couple of defining factors of play are that it is time spent without purpose, and you tend to lose track of time when you're playing. When I ask my patients what they do for play, most of them stare at me blankly. It may take time to think of what we want to do for play or to let go enough to have non-purposeful time built into every day. Brown says the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. So it's all the more worthwhile to make this a priority. And finally, 5, mindfulness. There are many benefits to developing a mindfulness practice: improved mood, increased concentration, and improved immune functioning. Some of the latest research on mindfulness shows how a daily practice actually mitigates some of the signs of aging. Mindfulness is simply bringing attention to the present moment without judgment. The trick is that the mind will naturally wander. The practice is to gently bring it back to what is in front of you, which is why we often pick something pleasurable to focus on. This could be the sunrise, a cup of tea, or more formal practices such as breathing exercises, yoga, or guided meditation. So think of these as your top 5 for gracefully moving into the next day, the next month, and the next year. As seasons change, so do we. While we can't stop the passing of time, we can mindfully make choices that will make each moment worth savoring.
Thank you, Deb. Well, let's find out what Amy Dickinson has for us today. Well, dear Amy, I have a longtime friend who has asked our circle of 5 women to be bridesmaids for her wedding photos. She's been married to her second husband for years. They own a beautiful home and have 2 children. She had a lavish first wedding and opted for a small second wedding to which none of us were invited. From a wealthy family, and her parents are buying her a new wedding dress and paying for the photographer. She wants to do this as a 40th birthday present to herself She asked her bridesmaids to drive to her parents' ranch, a 3-hour drive each way, for a vow renewal. Our children and spouses were invited. She had chosen a bridesmaid dress that cost $100. She says she wants to get perfect photos. But we were just informed that it is no longer a vow renewal because it was too much effort. So the weekend will include no spouses or children except for her own. This is now a hardship. A couple of us are single moms who would have to arrange for weekend childcare and are stressed out about the cost and time commitment. We all work long hours. We can't afford her asks for her fake wedding photos, but we don't want to let her down. Would it be unreasonable to ask her to be flexible on the dress or to choose a closer setting for the photos? Signed, Put Upon. Dear Put Upon. First, a clarification. You and your friends are not bridesmaids. There is no ceremony, no celebration, and no bride and groom. You are props. She dangled an event in front of you which never materialized, and that event is what you all agreed to. I suggest you all tell her politely that you simply can't do this. If she wants to have her fake dream wedding photos taken at her parents' ranch, then that's her business. Perhaps as a birthday gift, you and your friends could host a party and pitch in and hire a photographer to take some fun, candid shots of your group. Dear Amy, I am a woman in my late 20s and I have a serious girlfriend. My partner and I have been together for nearly 4 years. We've lived in 3 states together, own a dog, have successful careers, and ultimately love each other the best we can. It has taken a while for my girlfriend to be ready to commit to marriage, but when she was finally ready, she asked my mother for her blessing to propose to me. I told her ahead of time that it would mean something to my mom. It ended up backfiring, and my mom told her that she was uncomfortable with the idea until she could have a conversation with me. My mother asked her to wait to propose. I am very upset. I feel like it was selfish to put this on hold until it works for her. I will be home for the holidays and fully intend to speak with her about this. But isn't she being selfish? Do parents ever really say no when someone asks for their child's hand in marriage? Signed, Not Engaged. Well, dear Not Engaged, it is possible that you are reading your mother's reaction incorrectly. When my now husband went to my mother to ask for my hand, she replied, Amy doesn't have to ask my permission for anything. She then asked me privately if I wanted to get married. I did. And she told the guy, well, there you have your answer. Not quite the charming scene we had in mind. Your mother might want to confer some serious objections to you. If your partner had been reluctant until recently, she could caution you that reluctance before marriage can translate into something else later. Or she might just want to ask you if this is what you want. Have this conversation with your mother. It's true, she fouled up this moment, but if you two want to get married, her reaction shouldn't change the outcome. And finally, dear Amy, disturbed daughter wanted to confront her father over snapping at her mother, but you told her to handle it privately. I disagree. I think she should call him out when he's doing it. Signed, Disappointed. Well, dear Disappointed, because of the dynamic she described, I thought it wisest to start with a private chat. But if that doesn't inspire him to alter his behavior, then she should definitely call him out. Wow, go get it.
Thanks. Here's an article about Sotheby's from New York. In a bid to fight art fraud, Sotheby's announced Monday that it had purchased a forensics firm whose founder once helped the auction house belatedly identify a $10 million painting as a fake. Sotheby's said that Orion Analytical, based in Williamstown, Massachusetts, will be folded into the company. Its founder, James Martin, will lead a new scientific research department charged with making sure the works the auction house deals with are authentic. The purchase comes amid a number of recent art forgeries, including a supposed old master painting that was sold by Sotheby's to an art collector for $10 million in a private sale in 2011. Last March, Sotheby's declared Portrait of a Man by Franz Hals a fake after questions arose about its authenticity. An in-depth technical analysis by Orion, reviewed by another conservation scientist, confirmed the suspicion. Sotheby's said Monday that the acquisition of Orion Martin's appointment would add to collectors' confidence in the auction house. Martin, who founded Orion Analytical in 1990, has analyzed the chemical and structural composition of disputed artworks for clients around the world, including private collectors, museums, galleries, and the FBI. He is an artist, conservator, and forensic scientist. Rather than being retained on a series of one-off assignments when issues arise, Jamie will be establishing a set of protocols to determine which works should be examined proactively, as well as training our specialist staff to identify potential issues, Sotheby's said. The auction house said it could then provide better service to its clients in the areas of art, objects, and wine. New York art attorney Peter Stern called Sotheby's' move brilliant and said Martin was one of the most highly respected art analysts in the world. Among his nearly 2,000 investigations, Martin examined the paintings in a sensational art fraud case involving the once highly respected Knoedler and Company, a Manhattan gallery accused of selling forged fakes of modern masters like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko for millions of dollars. The 150-year-old gallery closed in 2011. The bogus paintings, created by a Chinese immigrant in New York City, were sold between 1994 and 2011. The civil trial ended in a settlement in February. The terms were not disclosed. Knoedler's lesson may well be that art attorneys need to educate clients who are buying artworks to require warranties relating to authenticity, Chicago-based art attorney Scott Hodes said. The Orion Analytical acquisition has spotlighted this need.
Thanks, Deb. It's 11:37, and we're going to move on to business and the economy. Well, Americans should get used to a new normal of slow economic growth, business economists say. The median estimate from economists surveyed by the National Association for Business Economics calls for the American economy to grow 2.2% in 2017, up from a forecast 1.6% this year and unchanged from the previous survey in September. The improved number is still lackluster by historical standards. U.S. economic growth averaged 3.1% a year from 1948 to 2015, according to the Congressional Research Service. But the business economists say Americans need to get used to slow growth. 80% of those surveyed believe the potential growth rate of the American economy will remain at 2.5% or lower over the next 5 years. The economy has been hobbled by an aging workforce and weak gains in productivity. Still, the economists see the risk of a recession as remote. 90% expect the current economic expansion to continue until at least 2018. They expect employers to add an average 168,000 jobs a month in 2017, down from 180,000 a month so far this year. Those surveyed also predict the unemployment rate, which fell to a 9-year low of 4.6% last month, will average 4.7% in 2017. A healthy job market means wage growth is likely to outpace inflation this year and next, the economists say. They see consumer prices rising 2.3% next year, almost double the 1.2% increase they expect this year. 2/5 of the economists say increased spending on roads, bridges, and other infrastructure projects would be the best way to boost economic growth over the next 4 years. 36% chose tax reform, which usually includes reducing the high official U.S. corporate tax rate in exchange for closing tax loopholes. President-elect Donald Trump has said both infrastructure spending and tax reform will be priorities in his administration. The economists expect the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates at its meeting next week and to follow up with 2 more rate hikes next year. The association surveyed 52 professional economic forecasts from October 31 to November 16. Those who responded before the November 8 election were allowed to send in new estimates after Trump's unexpected win. Deb?
Thanks. The headline in the money section of the Omaha World Herald says, in post-election America, even Fruit Loops are hot potatoes. Fruit Loops and Frosted Flakes aren't normally the kinds of brands to get caught in the political crosshairs, but in the aftermath of a combustible election, Kellogg's cereals and a growing number of consumer brands have found themselves the unexpected targets of boycotts and hot-tempered rhetoric. Kellogg said last week it would pull advertising from Breitbart News, a website that its critics say trades in racist and sexist content. In response, Breitbart called on readers to boycott the company, devoted a chunk of its front page to stories about Kellogg or the boycott, and sparked a social media outcry. Consumers on both the right and the left weighed in, saying they would either stop buying the company's products or stock up on them. The maker of Eggo waffles and Pop-Tarts is only the latest American corporation caught in the crossfire. In the weeks since the election, companies have navigated a sharply politicized environment that has entailed calls for boycotts, explosive social media responses to executive comments, and thorny interactions between frontline workers and their customers. I've never seen anything like this before, where companies find themselves so open to attack for their points of view or their speech, said Leslie Gaines Ross, chief reputation strategist for public relations firm Weber Shandwick. Companies are now much more in the fray and seen as political targets. Protests have targeted companies after specific comments or incidents. After a New Balance executive made a supportive comment about Donald Trump in response to a journalist's question about a trade deal, New Balance manufactures its shoes in the United States. People shared images of themselves tossing or even burning its sneakers, and a neo-Nazi blogger hailed them as the official shoes of white people. At a conference, PepsiCo CEO Indra Nooyi said some of her employees were crying about the election outcome, but she also congratulated Trump and called for unity. The comments triggered another call for a boycott by supporters of the president-elect. Delta Airlines was called out on social media for not immediately removing a passenger from a plane after his expletive-laden pro-Trump rant. The airline's CEO, Ed Bastian, later said in a memo to employees that it would ban the customer for life and refund other passengers' tickets. I also want to make sure all of you know we have your backs, he wrote. The heightened tension in our society means that now more than ever we must require civility on our planes and in our facilities. Others have organized broader efforts. An app called Boycott Trump, created by a grassroots anti-Trump organization, tells users whether companies are connected to the president-elect. Before the election, a marketing strategist started the Grab Your Wallet hashtag to encourage consumers to avoid companies that do business with the Trump family. In Kellogg's case, the breakfast giant said its decision to pull ads from Breitbart had nothing to do with politics. In an emailed statement, spokeswoman Chris Charles said, "We regularly work with our media buying partners to ensure our ads do not appear on sites that aren't aligned with our values, and that after learning from consumers about the ads on Breitbart, the company decided to stop advertising there."
Thank you. Well, it's time for sports. Mike Riley describes new assistant Dante Williams as a coach full of energy and expertise, who he also expects to be a dynamic addition as a recruiter. No wonder the Huskers are so eager to put the 34-year-old Williams to work immediately. Nebraska got the guy who I think is the second or maybe third best recruiter on the West Coast, said Ryan Bartow, national recruiting insider for 247 Sports. The guy is that good at talent acquisition. After spending the past year at Arizona, Williams is expected to coach Nebraska's cornerbacks and sub-package specialists, nickel and dime personnel, as well as have involvement in pass defense coordination. The Huskers threw some extra coin his way to help bring him aboard. He's expected to make $400,000 his first year, with the salary escalating to $425,000 in 2018. The Arizona Daily Star, $115,000 this year with the Wildcats. Greg Biggins, national recruiting analyst at Scout.com, knows full well why Williams is such a hot commodity despite having coached just 1 year at a power school. He's just a cool guy. There's really no other way to say it, Biggins said. I've heard some coaches try to talk to kids and it's painful. They try so hard to sound cool and hip and whatever, but with Dante, he's just a cool dude. He's just a regular guy. He's young. He's energetic. He has a big personality. He has that going for him. But the biggest thing is he really loves recruiting. He loves the chase. He enjoys that part of it. I kind of call it that new believer zeal. A lot of coaches, I get it. They've been doing this for years and years. You get tired of it, having to go and basically suck up to these 17, 18-year-old kids. But Dante is young enough and new enough into it where he actually still enjoys it. The addition of Williams means some tweaks to the Husker staff. Brian Stewart, who coached cornerbacks this year and also recruited well in California, will turn his attention now to coaching the safeties. Defensive coordinator Mark Banker, who worked with the safeties this year, will return solely to the coordinator role. Riley has plans to divide special teams coaching among multiple staff members. Riley needed just 8 days to fill the spot left open when he dismissed Bruce Reed, who had served as Nebraska special terms coordinator and was making $450,000 a year. Excuse me. Now Williams can help coach during bowl practices, which begin Friday. Just as importantly, he can get on the road recruiting for the Huskers before the next dead period begins December 12th. On Monday afternoon, the coach's Twitter avatar already showed him throwing the bones. Time to get to work, he tweeted in an informative message about being cleared to recruit for Nebraska at 2:45 p.m. and headed to Omaha for a 6 p.m. flight to do just that. Some strong recruiting Arizona had probably their highest ranked class in 15 or 20 years, and he's probably the number one reason because of that, Bartow said. I think the reason for Dante's success in terms of recruiting is he works at it. He out-hustles and outworks his competition. Part of his everyday regime is making sure these kids know how much of a priority they are. Williams was responsible for 9 of the commitments in Arizona's current recruiting class. One of those, Greg Johnson of Los Angeles, who was rated the #1 athlete prospect in the country by 247 Sports Composite, announced his decommitment from the Wildcats on Sunday night. He's visited Nebraska before, and now he is among a group of top-notch prospects on the West Coast the Huskers hope to have increased odds of adding to their class. Johnson is also a teammate at Hawkins High School of 5-star wide receiver Joseph Lewis, who is strongly considering Nebraska. I can't overstate it enough. Dante is extremely tight with the Hawkins coaching staff, Biggins said. Prior to joining Arizona's staff, Williams was at San Jose State for 3 seasons, serving as the program's recruiting coordinator for the final 2 while he coached the secondary. He was killing it at San Jose State, which is not normally a place you hear someone say he killed it there, Biggins said. But what happened was he was the first guy on a lot of guys, and then eventually the Pac-12 teams would jump on these guys late and he'd lose them. But it still showed he's a pretty good evaluator. As a recruiter, he was recognized last year by Sports Illustrated as a top 10 recruiter in college football and named the top recruiter in the Mountain West Conference. And so Riley brought in a guy who he hopes can help net more game changers. One way that you can win the West and the Big Ten is be able to recruit better, and that's what Dante is going to bring, Bartol said. And he's going to bring it in the one area, California, that they're emphasizing that they want to get dudes out of. And that's why they gave him double the money, and that's how they got him.
Thanks. Here's some volleyball news. The headline says regional could seem like repeat for Huskers. From Lincoln, there were going to be consequences, Coach John Cook told his Nebraska volleyball team near the end of Monday's practice. Big consequences for the team that lost the workout's final competitive serving drill. But when a victor had been decided, there were no punitive sprints or bear crawls. The Huskers in the losing unit gathered in the southwest corner of the practice court, picked up a microphone, and began literally to face the music. Their penance was to entertain the winners with a karaoke rendition of Britney Spears' Baby One More Time. It was just the first song that came into my head, said setter Kelly Hunter, who took it upon herself to choose the song. It was one last chance to mix things up in a week where Nebraska, 29-2, will have to navigate at least one familiar opponent and possibly 2 to advance to the NCAA Tournament Final Four in Columbus, Ohio. The top-seeded Huskers regional semifinal match with number 16 seed Penn State, 24-9, at 11 a.m. Friday at the Devaney Center will be the team's 3rd match of the year, with NU beating the Nittany Lions in 5 games on the road and picking up a sweep in Lincoln. It would be fun to play someone we haven't played yet, but on the other hand, we have Penn State really well scouted, Hunter said. To play someone we've won twice against is a confidence booster for us, but on the other hand, they have a lot of motivation to come back and beat us as well. If Nebraska takes care of the Nittany Lions for the 3rd time, the Huskers would move to Saturday's 3 p.m. regional final against one of 2 Pac-12 rivals that are also facing off for the 3rd time this season. Number 8 seed Washington, 28-4, will face unseeded Arizona, 20-14, at 1:30 p.m. Friday in the day's 2nd regional semifinal in Lincoln. Washington has already beaten Arizona twice, winning 3-1 in Tucson, Arizona on October 23rd in a match where 3 of the 4 sets were decided by 2 points. All Pac-12 senior outside hitter Kalei Mao had 23 kills for the Wildcats that night, but it wasn't enough to overcome 17 Washington blocks, including 11 from junior Chrissy Jones. The Huskies made quicker work of Arizona in a sweep on November 10th in Seattle, led by 14 kills from Pac-12 Player of the Year Courtney Schwann. If both Nebraska and Washington advance to Saturday's final, it would be a rematch of last year's regional final in Lexington, Kentucky, where the Huskers beat UW 3-1 to reach the Final Four in Omaha. It would also mark the 6th time in 9 years Nebraska and Washington have played in the postseason. The thing is, with Penn State and Washington, we're pretty familiar. They're familiar with us, Cook said. It would be interesting to see if there's any adjustments or things like that. Arizona, I don't know a thing about. One Husker who may be looking forward to a 3rd meeting with the Nittany Lions is senior outside hitter Andy Malloy. The Baylor transfer has struggled of late, hitting .067 or lower in 3 of her last 4 matches. But Malloy was lights out in the 2 matches against Penn State, combined for 30 kills and .338 hitting percentage. My teammates definitely did a good job telling me what shots were open, Malloy said, and I feel like I was mixing in different shots so that the defense on the other side of the net didn't really know where I was going to swing. On Monday, Cook tried to put a brave face on Friday's 11 a.m. start, which is the earliest of the 4 regional sites on Friday. It will also be the earliest match the Huskers have played this season. Nebraska played 2 matches this year that started at noon, beating Montana State and Maryland. We did really well in those matches, Cook said of NU's 2 midday matches, but I think once they get on the court Friday and it gets going, the adrenaline is going to take over and nobody's going to know what time it is. My theory on this, why Nebraska is playing early and Wisconsin's not, and Minnesota's not, and Texas is not, is they know we're still going to fill Devaney whether it's 11 in the morning, 7 in the morning, 10 at night. Our fans are going to show up. Cook said the team's practice structure will change somewhat with the Huskers practicing at 11 a.m. on Thursday to get used to the morning start. The coach said if the Huskers do their normal game day serve and pass practice on Friday, it might have to be as early as 6 a.m., since Nebraska would have to allow all 4 teams at the regional to have practice time before the 11 a.m. match. We asked the NCAA committee about that, Cook said, and they said they hadn't thought about that.
Well, Clemson quarterback Deshaun Watson is a Heisman Trophy finalist for the 2nd consecutive season, joining Louisville quarterback Lamar Jackson, backer Jabril Peppers, and Oklahoma teammates Baker Mayfield and D-Day Westbrook. The finalists were announced Monday on ESPN, and the award will be presented Saturday in New York. Watson finished 3rd in last year's voting, won by Alabama running back Derrick Henry. Just like last year, he heads to New York not as the favorite, but as the contender coming on strong at the end. You just don't have a lot of 2-time Heisman finalists over the history of your program. He is our first, and he's very deserving, Clemson coach Dabo Swinney said in a statement. I've said it before, I believe he is the best player in the nation and has been a great representative of our university. Mayfield finished 4th last season, but did not get an invitation to the Heisman presentation in New York. Westbrook and Mayfield are the first teammates to be finalists since Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart from Southern California finished 1st and 3rd, respectively, in 2005. Peppers is the first defensive player to be a Heisman finalist since Notre Dame linebacker Monty Te'o was a distant runner-up to Johnny Manziel in 2012. Finalists are determined by the margins between vote-getters. The ballots of more than 900 voters, which included former Heisman winners, were due Monday. It seemed as if Jackson would be a runaway Heisman winner, but the 15th-ranked Cardinals lost their final 2 games. Watson, meanwhile, has surged since Clemson's only loss to Pitt in mid-November. The raw numbers still favor Jackson, who is 2nd in the nation in total yards per game and has accounted for 51 touchdowns. Mayfield and Westbrook have been a dynamic combination, and late in the season, number 7 Oklahoma started a dual campaign to promote both for the Heisman. Peppers played defense, offense, and special teams for Michigan, lining up all over the field. He had 60 tackles, 3 sacks, and an interception on defense, scored 3 touchdowns on offense, being used mostly as a wildcat quarterback, and averaged 14.8 yards with a touchdown on punt returns. Deb?
I have a little hockey news here. The Omaha Lancers defenseman Derek Hamlin on Monday was named the United States Hockey League's Defenseman of the Week. The Mercier, Ontario native had 2 assists in Omaha's overtime loss Friday at Des Moines. Hamlin was +2 in that game and Omaha's 4-1 home victory Saturday over Muskegon. This is the first Player of the Week award a Lancer player has won this season. The Lancers host Tri-City Friday at 7:05 p.m. in the Ralston Arena. And here's a tiny golf note. An Omaha 4th grader on his 3rd try will be at Augusta National in April for the National Drive, Chip, and Putt Finals. Udiat Sarangadevat of Omaha, who attends Aldrich Elementary in Millard, had not gotten past the 2nd stage previously. When not practicing, a press release said, He works on writing and illustrating his second book, watching Star Wars, and swimming competitively. And here's a golf note. Former UNO Athletic Director Bob Danenauer has been named the new development officer for the Nebraska Section PGA.
Well, 12 o'clock, that means our time is up. So for Don Van,
And Deb 80.
so long, everyone. Have a great week.
And thank you both very, very much, very sincerely, for coming and giving your time.
I couldn't move my lips today. Oh, I've got some sinus issues, nothing big, but, and I get dry. You ever get that?
Yeah.
You just can't, just doesn't want, your lips don't want to move.
Well, did you take a decongestant? Because oh no, that's not it.
I don't do well with those things,
I don't either.
especially sleep. I have really strange dreams. Oh, well.
Well, be better by
I'll
next
live.
week.
Well, I'm not really sick, but Doug McDermott has gone to the D League. Huh?
What? Doug McDermott has done what?
I should have read that one. The Chicago Bulls assigned former Creighton for Doug McDermott to the Windy City Bulls in the D League.
Hmm.
He's missed the last 9 games because of concussion.
Oh. Well, that explains it.
Well, why would they send him to the minors
I guess because he won't stop playing.
when they keep playing? But